Welcome to More Than Our Story, where our mission is to share uplifting stories from inspirational people. Today, I'm joined by Nicholas Umali. Nick, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you, and I want to thank you up front for being here and sharing your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my story with you.
So, on that note, I'll turn the floor over to you now and let you share your story.
Sure. So my name is Nick Umali. My story is kind of a longer one and have career based. Back in 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 4 medullary thyroid cancer. And since then, it's been a whirlwind of emotions and different issues that I've had to deal with. And overall, coming to a conclusion on how I want to continue to live my life and progress through my diagnosis. Before this, though, I was actually a pilot and I had ambitions to become a commercial pilot in the airline industry. And when I was diagnosed with medullary thyroid cancer, my entire life took a different turn. I wasn't able to fly anymore. I wasn't able to perform the duties that I thought I could. And I kind of was lost for a few years. It took me a while to kind of get my footing. And each day I still kind of struggle to find where my balance is. But I'm starting to develop a mindset of where I want to see myself and how I want to continue my life moving forward. So that's just a little brief summary about myself.
So, what was the catalyst that started all this? How did you first figure out that something was wrong?
Sure. So I was working down in Southern California, the Temecula area, as a flight instructor. And while I was flying, I felt this strain in my neck. It kind of felt like some lumps. So I thought, maybe I was just stressed out. Maybe it was just muscles were tense. And I decided, let me go actually look at this. So I visited my uncle who lived in Redlands area, and he's a emergency room surgeon. So he was there and he was able to check on me. And as he was feeling my neck, he said it felt like it was a bunch of lymph nodes. So he told me, why don't you go ahead, check yourself into the ER, go get some scans, and then I can come see you indirectly and we can take a look at what's actually going on. So I went into the facility the next day, I checked myself in, and they were feeling my neck, trying to identify like what this could be. And so I started doing scans. We did a CT scan, did a couple x-rays as well to see what was going on. And I kept hearing the term cancer. It wasn't that they were saying that I had cancer, but they were using this word in their sentence structure. And it started to alarm me a little bit because I'd never thought I could have cancer or deal with this. So later I was discharged from the ER and they said, let's go get a fine needle biopsy of this lymph node. It could just be swollen. We don't know yet. So I go in to get a fine needle biopsy. And within 30 minutes, the doctor came back in and she's like, you have cancer. And it was just kind of a shock to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought that this could be the reason. And I didn't really know what was to come after this. I was kind of in a daze. I just kind of remember people were talking to me and it was almost like it was muted in a way. I was kind of just out of it. I wasn't sure how to process that. So later I started getting calls from doctors, and this was peak COVID time around 2020. Also, to make things worse, about a month previously, my grandpa had passed away. And, we were still kind of going through that, and there was just a lot of emotions. But I started getting calls from doctors, and they're like, hey, we're struggling to get a room so we can do a surgery. Now they start saying the word surgery, and I have no idea what to expect here. But we got a surgery scheduled for January 8th, and I was lucky to actually get one. So after that, I went in for surgery. It took about 8 hours for them to actually conduct the full surgery. And it turned out it was a radical neck surgery. So they had to complete dissection of my thyroid. They completely removed it. They also took out several lymph nodes and my laryngeal nerve on my right side. So when I lost all of this, I remember waking up and I couldn't speak. And that was probably the weirdest feeling, was just realizing like I can't actually talk. I can't actually like function normally. And I think that's where it really set in that like this is different. way worse than I expected it to be. So that's kind of the overall process of how I went through this. And then I was right in the middle of my diagnosis, not sure what to do.
I can't imagine you had enough time to even wrap your head around what was going on. It sounds like the time span between finding the lump, hearing the word cancer, having surgery was so quick that I'm sure you were kind of grasping at straws. Can you share some insights to your mindset during those first few days and weeks leading up to and following surgery?
Yeah, I think the first few days kind of leading up to that, I was in a bit of, I'd say, denial. It kind of felt like this couldn't happen to me. I was kind of cracking jokes about it. I wasn't really understanding what was about to happen to me or what I was going through. And it was only afterwards where I started to like realize, oh my gosh, this is life changing. And obviously I was, concerned about it. I kept praying about it. And I started asking God, like, Lord, I don't know what this is, but I'm hoping that I can be ready for this. And I'm a Christian. I try to be as spiritual as I can. And I think my relationship with God has really helped me go through this. But during this time, I was starting to question things because it seemed out of left field that this would happen to me. And I didn't even know what to expect afterwards with my career, which was the next awakening to this whole circumstance. Um, After surgery, I recovered for about 2 weeks. I was kind of like, oh, I'll get through this and then I can go back to flying. And I didn't even think about how strict things are because as a pilot, we're required to maintain a clear bill of health and a medical certificate, which allows us to fly. And so a lot of people do fly with different pre-existing conditions or, cancers. It's not uncommon, but it depends on the severity of the cancer and also how detailed it is. And I didn't realize how bad mine was till after surgery when they told me it was stage 4. It had invaded multiple areas of my neck. And in fact, there were also some spots around my lungs which they couldn't reach. So they were only able to get my neck, and finding out that it was a lot worse than I realized was also a wake-up call. I didn't really have a lot of time to process those things, and it kind of just felt like, dominoes falling. It was like this next realization that, oh my gosh, this is worse. Then realizing, oh my gosh, my career is affected by this, and even going further than that.
So obviously a cancer diagnosis alone can greatly impact your mental health, to say nothing of the fact that your career was now in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Uh, how did you find your solace?
It took me a few years to find that. And I guess one thing about myself that I found in myself is I'm a very determined person. I found what I wanted to do at a young age, and being a pilot was just one of the coolest things ever that I got to do. And I guess I was one of those people that kind of made it my personality. Um, so I really thrived off of that. And I know some people, it takes a while for them to figure things out. And each of us face our own journey on that. But to me, aviation was my solace. It was a place that I could go to where literally when I took off, all of my problems are on the ground. And when I'm up in the air, all I have to do is focus on completing the mission, which is landing the aircraft safely. Everything else was irrelevant. Any personal drama or emotions that I might have dealt with. So when I found that I didn't have that, I felt this hole in my life that I didn't have that structure that I built for myself. And it kind of led me down a route of depression because I didn't have that core anymore. And this also made me question my, you know, spiritual orientation because I was realizing I think I might have I set my cores and my fundamentals incorrectly. Like I was shooting towards a goal that I should not have placed at the center of my life, where I should have put God. And it took me a while to decipher that. A couple of years after surgery, though, to continue the story, I went in to go apply for my medical because I was about to expire on a first class medical. and it would have reverted to third class, which I could still fly on that, but for commercial purposes, I would need to maintain a first class. So I go into the AME, Aviation Medical Examiner, and I conducted the physical, and I start to tell him about my diagnosis, and he can obviously see that I just had a surgery because my neck's swollen, and he was kind of shocked that I would come in right after surgery and try to apply. But I told him, I'm like, what can I do to make this work? And so he told me he'd have to send it to the FAA because it's past his point of jurisdiction due to that diagnosis. So we sent it into the FAA. I didn't hear from them for a few weeks, but later I got a letter and a call, and they told me that they are denying me. And so I kind of expected that I would receive a denial initially, and I'm like, okay, what is the reapplication process? Turns out they said you have to wait 2 years. And my entire job was flying. So 2 years of my life, I'm not allowed to fly anymore. And that was just a complete devastation. I was like, oh my gosh. And I start asking these doctors, I'm like, this is my career right now. This is how I'm providing for my family. What do you guys expect me to do in these 2 years? And they didn't care. They were very, not to diss on the FAA so much, but they're very matter of fact and a bit heartless on how they deliver information. So when I got that, that was the next devastating thing for me, is that I no longer had that peace anymore. In fact, I also just lost a job. And to make things even worse, the company that I was working at, which, for flight instructing, they basically told me to my face that because I didn't have a medical, I was no longer worth things to their company. And they were trying to find ways to get rid of me. They were looking at my past, trying to see if I made any mistake that they could fire me for, or, create some series of events to just completely kick me off their payroll. And, I decided I didn't know what to do, so I quit. And that was probably one of the more careless things I've done, but I just didn't know what else to do. And during that time period, I kind of wandered for a bit. It was like 3 weeks where I didn't really have a job. But one of my students, his dad worked in aviation insurance, and he told me, hey, Nick, my dad has an opening at this company. They like to hire pilots. Maybe you can get a job here. And so I go in for an interview, and I actually was able to get the job because he gave me a good recommendation. And I was excited about the prospect of like, oh my gosh, I got another job. This is great. But it is insurance, and not exactly a career that I wanted to be in. And I didn't really enjoy it as much either. So as again, I lost a piece of, my solace in aviation, and now I was doing something else. And I never saw myself sitting at a desk doing insurance work. And to me, that was just a huge blow to my life, is that this is where I'm at now. All of these things happened to me, and I didn't have a choice on the matter. Anyway, to fast forward a little bit, I worked in insurance for about 2 to 3 years. I switched companies and was actually able to move up to Washington. And my wife and I both love Washington, so we were excited about the move. But during that time, I still felt like I didn't have a piece of myself. And slowly over the past few years, I started to realize the core of how I set my life, what I put my life as the pedestal, was aviation. And when I lost that, I didn't have anything. And my wife, she talked to me and was like, Nick, I think, I feel like you're so focused on this, you're not paying attention to me, or you're not recognizing our family, our dog. So I felt, it was kind of a wake-up call to me when my wife started telling me, I feel like you're so focused on this thing that you can't achieve right now, and you're starting to neglect the life that you're actually living. And she was absolutely right. I started to just kind of sink into depression. I was angry all the time, and it just didn't make sense. And, that really helped rekindle our relationship, because I felt horrible about all the things that I was putting her through. I told myself I never wanted to be the result of our financial problems. I never wanted to be the one that was sick or had to bring all this negativity into the family. And yet here I was doing all of those things that I feared the most. And seeing that and realizing, okay, I know it's not my fault that I got cancer, but I have a duty right now, which is to my family and to God. I need to be this role model in my family. So I started turning to God. I started talking to our pastor, and just working through things and having a devotion every day to try to rekindle my relationship. And since then, I felt more peace because I wasn't holding on to this thing in my life anymore, this thing that I had idolized so much. And I started actually just living my day to day and finding that I enjoyed it. The small things, the little things that I got to do, just taking my dog for a walk or having a nice meal with my wife or doing something around the house that was productive, or honestly just going to have fun on a camping trip. All these things that I guess seem small and mundane actually were more fulfilling in a way. And I sometimes balance back and forth because I still love to achieve things in life. I'm still a person that's driven and goal oriented, but I feel like this journey was really showing me that I had put something too important in my life. And honestly, cancer was just kind of the negative thing that happened. And I sometimes would find myself blaming myself for getting that disease. And I couldn't control it. It wasn't genetic. It was just kind of a fluke scenario. In fact, medullary thyroid cancer is fairly rare for most males. It's more common in women, and I think it's like less than 3% of all cancers are medullary thyroid cancer. Um, so I felt like an odd man out. Like I picked the gene lottery pool, and it was a bit hard to process that, but I think I found this rhythm and just the day to day living my life and trying to be the best person that I can be is something I strive to even more than what the career was.
That's I can relate to that on a personal note. I was starting to go down the self pity route, and I was gonna start blaming myself, but I think it was really when I realized just stay positive, be thankful every day, and that's how I kind of got through it. Gratitude, staying positive, maintaining a sense of humor, um, was pivotal, really, to my outlook. Now I'll shift gears here a little bit. Um, so your outlook on life, you were able to find some positivity there. Um, what about your physical health currently? What
Sure.
does that look like?
So, my condition, I have to go in. It's still considered an aggressive cancer. So I have to go into MD Anderson. I'm getting treated at MD Anderson right now, but I'll go in every 6 months and do a round of scans. Excuse me. And basically, they check, my chest to make sure that there's no residual tumors. They check my neck every so often with an ultrasound. It's a very thorough round of the tests, but the current treatment I'm on is a medication that I take twice daily, and it's enough to suppress my RET inhibitors, which allows me to live a normal life. There's a few mild side effects, like there's reported fatigue. Um, sometimes people will have like tingling sensations or like forget what they call it specifically, but like there's a couple of mild side effects that come with this medication. And I have to be careful sometimes with what I ingest with it because, it might affect the absorption rate. But basically, this medication is completely keeping me stable. We don't really use the word stable, it's more suppress. And, if I stop taking this medication, my cancer will continue to progress and grow. So I'm very thankful that this technology exists because 5 years ago it didn't. So I'm very fortunate that I am here with that. And in my medical trials, I went through a trial period where I was on this drug to see how my body reacted to it, and I paired very well with it, which, by the grace of God, I'm alive today because of that. Um, it wasn't easy either going through all the procedures. I did have a second surgery in 2022. They went back into my neck, basically full neck surgery, removed more lymph nodes, and tried to get any residual tumors. They were able to clear out most things, but it was still very difficult. Um, Another side effect of my physical health was when I woke up from my initial surgery, when they pulled out my laryngeal nerve, I lost eyelid function, which I could still close my eye, but it basically was like the entire half of my face was tired. So my eye kind of drooped and it was hard for me to hold it open. The other thing too was my right vocal cord was paralyzed. So I woke up not being able to speak. And that was probably the most fearful thing because all I could do was whisper. And it turned out that the way that they could repair this was by doing a Botox injection of my right vocal cord. And that was probably the most painful thing I've experienced because they had to take a needle through my neck, jab it right into my vocal cord, and pump it full of Botox. And they did this with barely any anesthesia. I was sitting down on a chair, um, and it was very painful procedure. But that was over 2 to 3 years ago now, and I'm still able to speak, which usually these Botox injections only last for about a year. And I think I've muscled my vocal cord enough to actually speak and enunciate things. It's not very clear, but it's still enough for me to talk normally. And, you know, again, by the grace of God, I'm able to still talk, which is incredible. Um, Physical health, though, I have noticed a couple of barriers where when I exercise, it's hard for me to draw breath, and I think it's due to this, stronger vocal cord. So I have to really concentrate on my breathing, and I found a rhythm that actually works for me, but it's still that barrier that I've had to overcome. The other thing too was when they did take out this nerve, one of my muscles on my back is no longer working. So my shoulder blade kind of protruded forward, and I had to work on this through exercise and physical therapy to strengthen my muscles to compensate for that. Um, so it hasn't been exactly the most peaceful route, but I know compared to some other situations, it's not that bad. And I have to remind myself of that is that this could have been a lot worse. There could have been a fatal route to this. There could have been a completely life altering thing, but I can still walk, I can talk, I can exercise. And I kept living this life wanting something I didn't have. And I think that was hard for me to look past because I could just see all of the problems. I couldn't see the way out or the life that I was living. And the fact that I can do these things is giving me that rejuvenation I need to keep living my own life.
What do you hope people take away from your story?
I hope if anyone could take something away from my story, it's that God is always with you. And I know not everyone's religious, and that's fine, but I have found that my personal walk with God, He was actually with me through this whole process and actually showing me things that I wouldn't have seen if I never got cancer. In a way, I almost view my diagnosis as a blessing because it's given me a new perspective on life. It's given me this route that I'm taking where I don't really know how it's going to go. In fact, a lot of things have changed. I'm fortunate that I have a better job that I enjoy. Um, it actually is with drones, which is why it's in the background. But God has really given me a lot more perspective, and I'm finding that as we go through things, we just have to keep going. In fact, when I was diagnosed, I actually had a friend of mine that I made through our diagnosis, and his cancer was much more aggressive, and he actually passed away within 3 months of his diagnosis. But the last words that he gave to me was that you need to keep going, Nick. God still has a plan for you. Just keep going. And, that stuck with me. And I've kept going back to that when I struggle with things. And in his last moments, he was so positive and uplifting about his life. And here I still had a chance in front of me, and I was angry and bitter. And I think it took me a second to flip that switch and move away from that. So if anyone's going to get anything from my story, it's that God is with you and things do change.
I want to thank you again, Nicholas, for sharing your story. it's incredible the way you were able to dig deep and just kind of rebirth yourself through your faith, and just it's really inspiring. And it reminds me of why I started this project, to share people's stories, to help provide some hope for other people going through difficult times. And I hope sharing your story today provided some catharsis for you.
Thank you.
So I want to say thank you for being so honest and open.
Yes, and thank you, Daniel. The work that you're doing is just incredible, and I'm hoping that a lot of people are able to grab things from what you're doing, and I'm hoping you're able to reach tons of people with this message. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it.